Okay, so let's get started. We have about 90 minutes in which to get this show on the road and get some heavy discussion going. In early March, our community, as you all know, witnessed an act of bullying against one of our middle school students. And tonight we have leaders from our school, as well as our city and our county, to discuss some things that have been done since March to try and correct this issue. Can I ask each panelist now to introduce yourself, starting with Superintendent Bonser?
Thank you, Pastor Joshua, and welcome everyone this evening. I'm Sara Bonser. I'm the Superintendent of Schools for Plano ISD, and I want to thank you all for joining us tonight at this summit for our discussion on bullying, harassment, and acts of racial hatred. We appreciate that you are here to listen and learn more about this important topic, and for us to be able to field questions from those who have joined us. We're also thankful to be here in partnership with the Plano Police Department and the Collin County court system and juvenile probation as we provide an opportunity for learning about bullying harassment through the lenses of all three organizations. As I have said before, and I will say again this evening, bullying, harassment, or threats or acts of racism against any Plano ISD student or any person is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. We want our schools to be places where all students feel included and welcomed, and all parents feel comfortable sending their children to school. Plano ISD is committed to the work it will take to ensure that this standard of care is in each of our school districts across the district. As much as we wish and hope that bullying and harassment and acts of racial hatred will never happen to any child, this tragic incident has opened up an important dialogue within our community for us to be reflective, to analyze, to assess areas where we need and can improve and take necessary actions. I really want to sincerely thank the parents, students, staff, and community who are with us this evening, and those who have provided honest feedback and suggestions to us over the past month or so. I also want to thank the community and parents and students and staff who have participated in our over 30 listening rounds that have been held throughout the month of April. Those small group sessions have provided voices that we have heard and will continue to hear that serve as a collective community to shape our work together around these very important issues. We look forward to the upcoming partnerships and collaboration in the days ahead. We care deeply about our students and the well-being of our kids. We want them to receive an excellent education, but equally as important, we want kids to know that they will be safe and well in our schools. Thank you for your time. I'd like to now turn it over to Dr. Theresa Williams, our Chief Operating Officer for Plano ISD.
Good evening. As Sara said, we want our students not only to receive an excellent education, but equally as important, we want our students to be safe every time that they come into our buildings, regardless of what grade level they're in. As Chief Operating Officer for Plano ISD, it's my role to take the foundation of this care and the work of our team and then translate that into our procedures and our practice and our communication that's essential to the excellence that we strive on behalf of our students and our families each and every day. I'm thankful for the partnership with the Plano Police Department and the Collin County court system as we look forward to sharing information related to the most pressing questions that we've received around the topics of bullying, harassment, and acts of crime from the perspective of each of our organizations. One point noted that from the very first day that we've had listening rounds is that parents want to know, and they want detailed communication about what actions Plano ISD has taken regarding the incident that occurred in March, but then also what to expect from us when reports and claims are made regarding bullying and harassment. Our parents have said, and we've listened, and we're continuing to listen, that they want to know what processes the school district is taking or takes. What does follow-up communication look like? what are potential consequences for such acts. And we hope that this evening is just another step in our communication process with our families. And we want to make sure that some of these important questions are answered this evening and that information is shared so parents can know. That being said, I want to take a few minutes just to give an update on the actions that the district has taken since March with regarding how we're addressing bullying, harassment, and acts of racism, and what we have learned and what improvements we're continuing to make in our district. So at the conclusion of our investigation, we realized that we couldn't wait for September to get here for our annual training that a staff is required to do. We felt like we needed to intervene immediately and have a refresher training around, especially around David's Law. So training modules were rolled out to all of our administrators, our counselors, our staff, our district leadership. Parents also clearly stated that they had questions about what consequences could be issued. Like, what does the code of conduct say? It's not really clear. We don't really understand. And so some of that will be answered as part of our program this evening. So more information to come as far as what are those consequences and what's some clear guidance for parents as they move forward. The district created a new webpage that has resources for parents and students regarding bullying, harassment, and how to report, because that is critical. So included on this website is a parent guide, and we will continue to refine, enhance, and add resources to families. And we also, every time there's something new, we're sure to include that in our staff communication that goes out district-wide. So what's taking place at our campuses right now is that we've harnessed our social emotional learning lessons, and we are providing opportunities for restorative practices and those lessons to take place so that our classrooms are more inclusive. Kids are learning about caring and compassion and empathy, and really focusing on the whole child. We heard a lot from parents in our listening rounds that they feel like this is a really important step, and especially at the primary grades and elementary, and then consistently across the district as they move into middle school. And so this is much of our work as we start to plan for next year, is to really look at how we can expand our social emotional learning as we move into the next and the upcoming school year. As we conclude all of our listening rounds, all of this information is going to be gathered and will be shared at our May 4th board meeting. And then continuing through the summer, we will continue to develop new strategies and needs that will be embedded and included in our district improvement plan as part of our plan of work. And more importantly, this is the time that we are more grateful for the input that we've received from our community and families as we work collectively and together so that we can best serve the interests and needs of our students in Plano ISD. So as we proceed with this evening's program, I want to introduce the rest of our administrative team that's with us on the call tonight. First, Dr. Courtney Gober, who is our Assistant Superintendent for Student, Family, and Community Services. Executive Director for Student, Family, and Community Services is Dr. Jennifer Miley. And our new Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Mr. Brian Lyons. So now I would like to turn over the program to our Plano Police Chief, Ed Drain. So I'll turn it over to you, Chief.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. And it is my pleasure to participate in this summit this evening. I think that we have the right players at the table. We have the school district, we have our juvenile judge, and we have our chief of our juvenile probation system here. And so hopefully this will be an informative summit for everyone. You know, since that incident that happened in March, I think it's really opened a lot of our eyes to how serious this issue of bullying is. Some cases of bullying, of course, will be handled by the school district, but when it crosses the line into criminal conduct, just like the case that we had in March may have, then we are ready to investigate that on the police side. So that's our role in this, and I am very happy to participate this evening. And now I'd like to turn it over to Judge Cynthia Wheless. Judge.
Chief Drain, and I am here tonight because Chief Drain asked me to do it, and anything he asked, I will do. I'm in such admiration of Chief Drain and his work, and I also have the duty of being the juvenile judge of Collin County, and the honor and the privilege. And I just love these kids that come through my court. So I have the privilege of being the juvenile judge for all kids in Collin County, including, of course, Plano ISD students between the ages of 10 and 17. I want to thank Chief Drain. I want to thank Pastor Isiah Joshua. I want to thank Superintendent Bonser, Dr. Gober, Dr. Williams, Ryan Lyons, and Dr. Miley, as well as Director Hadnot and Deputy Director Mike Combest. I also want to thank all the attendees here tonight. It's a pretty darn big crowd for a Zoom virtual summit on bullying, harassment, and race-based trauma, in my way of thinking of racial hatred. I really think it's important to get down to the feelings here. And so even though we like to stay in our minds and be intellectual, I think it's important to tell you where I come from. I'm an east side of Plano girl, and I grew up the last years of my life from 12 on going to Plano schools, and graduated from the best school in Plano, which is Plano Senior High School. Superintendent Bonser knows that I always say go Wildcats at every introduction. At the same time, I think it's unique that I grew up all around the United States, and I lived in St. Louis, Missouri, Fort Smith, Arkansas, Detroit, Michigan, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Meriden, Connecticut before I lived here. I think it was a great exposure to many different cultures and diverse populations. And I think that gives me a good perspective for the people that come before me in my courtroom. And so being here tonight, I want to devote myself to all of us kind of resetting our brains as to what bullying is. I encourage you to not think about when you were little and you could go home from your bullies and either cry on your mom's shoulder, or the phone was connected to the wall 5 or 10 feet away from where your mom was cooking dinner, and she could have thwacked you on the back of the head if you said something mean. That is not what our kids are dealing with today. They are taking their bullies home in their pockets every night, all day long, 24/7, all weekend. And they just don't get the relief that we got back in our day. One of the things that I also want to encourage everyone is that we also were very aware of and were worried about our teachers calling home to report us being mean to other students. We were also equally worried in my neighborhood in East Plano of someone's friend's mom calling and saying Cindy was mean to someone at school. And by the time I got home, my mom would know about it and I'd be in big trouble. So I encourage you all to listen to the teachers and other parents about what your kids are up to. And, you know, we all have probably been guilty at one time or another of bullying or excluding or being insensitive. The thing that we have today, though, is very, very serious. We all see the grave consequences of implicit and explicit bias. We cannot any longer take anything for granted of what we see in our midst. We have to all be upstanders. We have to all be a big stick in the mud. If we hear something that is biased and discriminatory, we have to speak up. And that's what I'm going to be encouraging you. The thing that we have to know, and I encourage you to think about, is the most dangerous person in the world is the person who doesn't have a clue that there is implicit and explicit bias in all of us. Like, I don't like people who abuse dogs. That's an explicit bias. Implicit bias is where your brain takes shortcuts that are not, you don't give your permission, it's involuntary. Your brain is making shortcuts. So we have to use bias interrupters and tools that the brain science research shows support for changing our neuro pathways. And we can do that by a couple of means that we'll get to later. But basically, we all have the duty, we're all in this together to eliminate these hostile environments so we don't get to a 13-year-old who is so traumatized in foster care and along the way leading up to that fatal mistake in her response ending in the fatal, in her death. So we want to all be on the same page, all moving in the same direction. I want you to all know that we all need to face the fact that the original bullying that I saw growing up was race, religion, disability based. And I think sadly, even though I'm 57, we're not beyond that point. Thank you. And I'll introduce my Director of Juvenile Probation, my friend, Mr. Lynn Hadnot.
Thank you, Judge, for that introduction. And good evening, panelists and everyone who is participating from home. Lynn Hadnot, I have the distinct pleasure of serving as Executive Director here for Collin County Juvenile Probation. I'm not originally from Collin County. I am a replant. Grew up in Southeast Texas in a small, very small rural community in Tyler County. But, you know, having moved here to Collin County in 2005, we've planted stakes in the ground here, and we have grown to love this community immensely and look to call it home moving forward. Having two small kids growing up and attending Collin County schools, living in this new age where kids are completely immersed in virtual learning, virtual video games, going to school in a very different time, as a judge spoke to, than we all did. This topic is very important and dear to me, pursuant to my own scars, having grown up in Southeast Texas, but some of the things that my own children are experiencing in real time today. So I'm very honored to participate in this discussion, and I look forward to contributing in any way that I can. So again, thank you all. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. And with that, I'll yield the floor to my right hand, who really helps me stay afloat here, Deputy Director Mike Combest. Mr. Combest, you're on mute.
Sorry, Mr. Combest, you're on mute. Go ahead. There you go.
Sorry, that was some of my best stuff. Again, Mike Combest, Deputy Director. Again, lifelong Collin County resident, unlike some of you transplants, but proud to be here, proud to be a part of this. While not involved in the original incident, I'm happy to be a part of any solutions that I can contribute to. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for those introductions. Let me say that in listening to your intros was a great segue into many of the questions that I have. In fact, some of you have a little bit of Baptist preacher in you, and you may not know it, but I could hear it in you. So I'm going to begin with the first question. And my first question tonight, just so that we'll have a commonality as far as definition, is what is bullying? So I'd like for you to define bullying for me, and maybe perhaps someone from the school or even the police department can address that.
All righty. Well, thank you, Pastor Joshua. Again, I'm Jennifer Miley, Executive Director of Student, Family, and Community Services here in Plano ISD. And I'm going to drop the bullying definition in the chat box for everyone today because it is a little lengthy. And to give a little context to that, this expanded definition came into existence during the 85th legislative session, so about 4 years ago. David's Law was born during that legislative session, and it enhanced our definition of bullying, as well as provided districts to include bullying prevention and mediation into their policy. It also provided for students and parents to have an anonymous reporting mechanism. So we do have that on our website, as well as include cyberbullying for on campus and off campus. So that is another wonderful feature that came out of David's Law. In addition, there is notification procedures that are in place to notify parents of bullying for both the alleged victim as well as the bully. To give a little context to that as well, the definition is now in the chat for you. Bullying, just in quick terms, is a significant act or a pattern of acts. It must exploit an imbalance of power by one or by a group of students. Also physically harms or threatens to harm a student, as well as potentially materially and substantially disrupting the educational process or operation of the school, and infringes on the right of a victim at school. This can occur on school property, at school, school-sponsored related activities, or on the school bus or a vehicle used to transport students. And again, because David's Law does expand that definition for cyberbullying, that is included in the definition as well.
Pastor, this is Chief Drain. You know, in our penal code, the penal code is the section of the code that deals with criminal law. The piece that Dr. Millie just talked about is from the education code, I believe. Is that right, Dr. Millie?
Yes, that comes from Chapter 37 of the Texas Education Code.
Right, and in the Texas Penal Code, there is not an offense of bullying itself, but as you just heard, it's pretty broad definition. So if bullying turns into one student actually assaulting another student, that assault itself, of course, is in the penal code, and that's what the police would address, is that aspect of it. Even though the parent may call it bullying, if a bigger kid hits on a smaller kid, that's actually an assault, and we would certainly investigate that as a criminal act.
Thank you. Now, all bullying does not take place necessarily at the school. Oftentimes it takes place away from school. When does the school intervene with off-campus matters?
Okay, so there's a variety of instances where we would intervene off campus. Per the Student Code of Conduct, school rules and the authority of the district to administer discipline apply whenever the interest of the district is involved, and that is on or off school grounds, in conjunction with or independent of classes and school-sponsored or school-related activities. But I want to give a little context to that because the district has disciplinary authority over students off campus when, for example, the student is going to and from a school or school-sponsored or school-related activity on district transportation. It also has authority during lunch periods in which the student is allowed to leave the campus. While the student is in attendance at any school-related activity, regardless of the time or location. For any school-related misconduct, regardless of the time or location. When retaliation against a school employee or volunteers occurs or is threatened, regardless of time or location. When the cyberbullying is involved, any criminal mischief on or off school property, offenses committed within 300 feet of the school property or the boundary line, and for certain offenses committed while on school property or while attending a school-sponsored or school-related activity of another district in Texas. And then, of course, we also have jurisdiction when the student commits certain felonies as outlined in our Texas Education Code. And as we're all here tonight regarding bullying and cyberbullying, so we do have jurisdiction over cyberbullying. And I did want to make sure that everyone understands that when we talk about electronic communication, that we're talking about cell phones, telephones, computers, a camera, so it could be a picture, email, instant messaging, text messaging, social media, any of those social media applications, or any internet-based communication tools. So there's a variety of ways where we would have jurisdiction on an off-campus offense.
I'd like to add, Pastor Joshua, if I may, Cindy Wheless again, the cyber impersonation. So setting up a Facebook page or an Instagram site or a Snapchat or any other social media in the posing as another person and then piling on that person is a felony offense. So I wanted to add that to our juvenile court Chief Drain's portion.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Miley, you mentioned several times David's Law. Would you just take a moment, or someone from the school take a moment and talk about David's Law and how David's Law actually pertains to bullying?
Absolutely. And I'll put a flyer here in just a moment in the chat. But again, this law allows schools to combat and most importantly, prevent cyberbullying by giving jurisdiction to investigate and address off-campus cyberbullying. In addition, David's Law requires the school districts to include cyberbullying in their district bullying policies and notify parents if their child is a victim or an alleged aggressor in bullying. Again, it also allowed for that expanded definition for bullying. So again, that's in the chat if you want to look at that. But it gives us the ability to extend our jurisdiction to those off-campuses issues of cyberbullying that oftentimes bleed into the classroom.
Let me jump on that real quick. Excuse me, Pastor. I want to clarify, just for the sake of understanding and clarity, anything off campus. If anybody has done anything off campus that interferes with learning on campus, then the school's going to take action. So she used a whole lot of words, but I just want to make sure we're very clear. Whatever happens outside the schoolhouse that impacts the schoolhouse can be looked into by the school. So that's just a quick and easy way to remember all that.
So Dr. Gober, so in other words, what I hear you saying for those parents who may not be from the school background, if something happens off campus, but let's say it's shared via Facebook or whatever, and it has a dramatic impact on campus, then the school definitely jumps in and takes a charge.
Absolutely, and that would also qualify under cyberbullying. But let me give you an example that maybe not, maybe it's a stretch for cyberbullying. You could have been at a party off campus. XYZ happened at that party that was embarrassing to you, or that you didn't want anybody to know about, and then people are chatting about it. I'm sorry, I'm saying chatting. I don't mean any use of technology. I mean, you're talking about it in the cafeteria and it causes disruption in the cafeteria. We can look into that.
Wonderful. We have a parent who has submitted a question that I think that we should address. And the question is this: in PISD, do we have any counseling for teens or groups of children who have or feel as though they're suffering from bullying?
Yes, I'm sorry. Let me answer that as well. So every school, every campus has guidance counselors, at least one, up to 10 or 11 if you're at one of the senior high schools. And the guidance counselor would be the first place I would stop if I was that student. However, in our school district and certainly in our city and county, there are numerous agencies that can help you with therapeutic counseling, if that's what you're looking for, or family counseling or conflict resolution counseling, because that level of counseling our guidance counselors do not do. They can certainly give you a referral to one of those places, but we don't have that. That is not a part of our guidance counselors toolbox. Specific to Plano ISD, we have a unique partnership with Southern Methodist University, SMU, and we have contracted with them to provide free to very, very low cost, I'm talking like $45 or less, counseling for any of our students and families in Plano ISD. And so give me a minute or two and I'll try to link that in our chat, how you access that counseling from SMU. But there are numerous agencies that all of us use, and I'm talking about Judge Wheless and Chief Drain, Juvenile Probation, and the school. I would say there's 20 to 30 agencies that we regularly go to, and some of them go to more than others just because of the low cost for families.
Thank you. Most people understand that the school cannot share information about students due to the FERPA law. What are a few examples of consequences that are used for bullying at the school, used for bullying by the police department when it gets that far?
I think I can answer that, Pastor Joshua. I have the unique opportunity of serving in dual roles at the moment. I'm still currently eligible as well, and so I get that question about FERPA, and in a nutshell, it's really about the privacy of a student's educational records, and so I'm not at liberty to discuss, another student's, academic, discipline, or behavioral history or records with any other person outside of that student's parent or guardian.
And I think to answer the part about what are some of the things that we use for consequences, administrators have a wide variety of techniques they can use to intervene with students. I think that the most common that everyone's aware of that we have in our tool belts are detentions, in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions. For more serious offenses, there's assignment to our disciplinary alternative education program, or also known as BIRD and GWIN Special Program Center. And then JJAEP, or the Juvenile Justice Alternative Education Program. However, I do want to make sure that people understand that there are very strict laws that govern the use of some of those techniques, in particular the District Alternative Program, as well as the JJAEP. So reviewing every situation on a case-by-case basis and making sure that we have all of the relevant facts is key to this process. I understand that we want to make sure that the appropriate consequences are applied to students that misbehave, but I'd also be remiss if I didn't talk about the importance of interventions, community circles, counseling, and working towards teaching replacement behaviors and the appropriate social responses in these cases.
Pastor Joshua, this is Chief Drain. When it comes to, and again, we don't have a specific offense for bullying, but when it comes to students, generally, many of them, of course, are going to be considered juveniles. And in Texas, that's someone who is 16 and below in most cases. So there are very different rules that apply on how we handle juveniles versus adults when it comes to criminal investigations. Like if we arrest an adult, it would not be uncommon we don't do it frequently, but if we thought we needed to, we could release photos of the person we arrested and let the community know that person had been arrested and placed in the custody. We can't do that with juveniles. And once an adult's case has been adjudicated, and we're pretty close hold on any criminal investigation that we're doing, whether it involves a juvenile or an adult. But once an adult case has been adjudicated, it's gone through the criminal justice system. Generally, those records you can get through open records. There are some restrictions, but juvenile cases you can't do that. So we're pretty limited on what we can share when it comes to juveniles that, for whatever reason, they ended up in a criminal investigation. And I'm sure the judge and Director Hadnot can also expound on that better than I can.
I don't know. I'll go first. This is Pastor Joshua, Cindy Wheless again. We actually have just this past week had a couple of dealings with David's Law. And so we believed when the charges first came in that they were Class B misdemeanors, but the use of the term KYS was used, which is, according to the popular shake my head is SMH, laugh out loud is LOL. That means kill yourself. So the use of, encouraging suicide does not require repeated acts of cyberbullying to fall under David's Law misdemeanor A. And so what we know is that we can't specifically identify juveniles by name or any other identifying information, which we would never do. But we can tell you that the offense will result in detention where necessary. So if a child has been spoken to by their school district and they do not change their ways, or better yet, haven't sort of confessed to the behavior, then we're going to worry about their effect on perhaps making the target kill themselves. And so that's what happened in David's Law. David Malat killed himself after pervasive bullying in San Antonio, in Texas. And he tried to change schools. He took advantage of, I know Plano ISD is a hero on the basis of allowing victims and or bullies to change schools to avoid the continued pervasive bullying. However, he changed schools and his bullies followed him again in his pocket on cyber, platforms of all sorts. And so what we're trying to avoid in juvenile is we're trying to avoid people harming themselves. Mr. Hadnot.
That takes me to a question that I wanted to ask, and that is, how do the school and the police handle retaliation?
So for the school district side, our school board policy prohibits retaliation by a student or a district employee against any person who in good faith makes a report of bullying, serves as a witness, or participates in an investigation. Just some examples of retaliation may include threats or rumors, spreading rumors, assault, destruction of property, or unjustified punishments or unwanted grade reduction. So there's just a few examples there of some of the things that they're referring to or what we refer to when we talk about retaliation. The code of conduct does allow for administrators to review each individual case and allows for disciplinary consequences to be assigned based on the severity of the case or the nature of the retaliation.
So Ms. Gober began by saying that I wouldn't call on people specifically, and so I'm going to kind of break the law because I'm his pastor. So I'm going to just take charge here and break the law a little bit. And I'm going to ask this question of perhaps the school as well as maybe our police chief, and I'm going to ask the judge this as well as Mr. Hadnot. And I want you to all answer this question. What type of protection or what type of supports are provided for those who report being bullied while you're investigating? Even what's out there for those who feel like they're being bullied? What kind of support is offered for those students? And I'll let you go, just whoever wants to jump in.
Mr. Hadnot.
I'll be happy to take this one first. As the Juvenile Probation Department's function is really unique. Our responsibilities as it relates to any juvenile delinquency referrals is spelled out in the Texas Family Code. Now, that's a fancy way of saying that we aren't the gatekeepers in terms of the offenses coming to us. Any offenses or behaviors, and as it relates to bullying, the most common type of referral that we'll get from Chief Drain in his department would be harassment. Is typically where it translates to a penal code violation. In fact, the cases that our judge just spoke to were harassment charges, where it's repeated, things being said or awful comments being made or directed toward the victim. In terms of protections, once that offense is received by the Juvenile Probation Department, we have a victims coordinator that immediately reaches out to the family of that alleged victim. We immediately start collecting information to ensure that we can put measures in place to put orders or safeguards in place to stop that bullying and communications effective immediately. And we also typically we'll have some type of mechanism, whether it be the child goes to court in the form of a detention hearing, and at some point they're released. We'll have terms that Judge Wheless or the magistrate will put in place to have them court ordered to cease and desist with those communications. And there's real teeth or consequences for violations of those protections. So a probation officer would, again, be providing supervision for those kids that are referred to us. And if they are to violate, we take retaliation and bullying very seriously, and that we immediately notify the court, the district attorney's office, that we have a potential violation and we take action. Typically, it will result in the conditions of release or a form of probation being violated, and that child will receive a sanction to be brought back before the court.
Pastor, this is Chief Drain. I just put since Director Hadnot mentioned harassment, the actual definition in the penal code is pretty long. So I just put it in the chat so people can take a look at that and see. And on retaliation, generally that's going to be, that is most definitely going to be a criminal offense when that occurs. That's well beyond bullying, and that's a felony offense at that. So primarily it's going to apply if someone is a witness and someone threatens to harm them because of their status as a witness, because they don't want them to cooperate with the police or the criminal justice system. And if we can prove that, that's a very serious offense. It could also be because someone is a public servant. So if you've got a teacher or staff member or counselor and someone threatens them because of their status as a teacher or a counselor or an administrator, that can also be considered retaliation. And again, as I said, those are felony level offenses and are very serious.
And on the school side, there are a variety of safety measures the campus can utilize during the course of a bullying investigation. So I've seen some campuses institute things such as a schedule change, increase in monitoring, change in locker locations, or maybe supervision during transitions. The student may also receive counseling supports from the school counselor, which include counseling options, lessons, and sometimes mediation. And then after the investigation, the plan is reviewed to determine any additional safety measures that might need to be added to the plan. And then all instances of bullying require a campus to conduct a threat assessment. And the wonderful part about doing the threat assessment protocol is that the campus assessment team uses, reviews all the information and then provides additional prevention and interventions as they're utilizing that tool.
Excellent. Can you tell me if the Student Code of Conduct addresses racism?
Yes, so from our current Student Code of Conduct, it is stated there that using profanity or vulgar language, name calling, religious, ethnic, or racial slurs, hate language, obscene gestures, and derogatory statements are prohibited. It's also addressed in our parent policy guide in terms of harassment and specifically where it talks about offensive jokes, name calling, slurs, and rumors. And then it shows up again in our acceptable use policy. The improper use of any computer or network is prohibited, and it includes the following: submitting, publishing, or displaying any defamatory, inaccurate, racially offensive, abusive, profane, and it kind of goes on there in our policy guide as well. So I think that it's listed in several locations, but the Student Code of Conduct is something that we review on an annual basis, and that's definitely something that I'll let Mr. Lyons speak on that if he'd like to, but something that we definitely need to look at and see, are there any adjustments that we need to make for the upcoming school year?
Yeah, as a campus principal, put that hat on again. It's something that we do address with students periodically at the beginning of the year and intermittently throughout the year. Students have questions about, if I'm called this, or it affects me and my learning, or slurs about my skin color or about my religion. Anything that falls under that form of harassment, we do address it. And again, the consequence could look different depending on the context of it. So that requires us to really go deep into an investigation to determine what steps that we take in order to make it a teachable moment for our students so that it doesn't occur again, but more importantly, protect the student that was a victim in that term and in that time. So we address those issues of race and religion and disability and all those things that Judge Wheless mentioned earlier on that we've seen in schools before.
Thank you. Judge, I'm going to ask you as well as Chief, because I think this is a term that is often misused. And so I'm going to ask you to bring some clarity as to the definition of a hate crime.
So, you know, I have this hate crime is near and dear to my heart because I have often thought, how could this not be logical from the very start? Why is this not decades older? Why would an assault caused merely because I have some immutable characteristic that offends you, I'm doing nothing wrong. I have not provoked you even with my words, but I am just sitting here, you know, typically at a bar and enjoying my own friends, and you, because of your prejudice based on whatever motivates you, your hate, literally because of my immutable characteristic, causes you to assault me for no other reason. Again, I have not provoked you. I have not even called you a nasty name, though I can think of many that I would like to. Should have always been prosecuted as a hate crime. How can we ever have served the purpose of the arc of justice? How could we ever look ourselves in the mirror and answer for the fact that that hasn't always been a crime? So I am very emotional about that. I think that that is one of the most easily common sense approach to the offense of, you didn't provoke me at all, but I assaulted you based on the color of your skin or your religion, some way immutable. So I can't be more vociferously anti the resistance that we got to that becoming a crime in and of itself.
Yeah, and Pastor Joshua, this is Chief Drain, and the hate crime provision in Texas is covered in something called the Code of Criminal Procedure. I think it's chapter 42, but it is pretty broad. It covers race, it covers ethnicity, it covers those with disabilities, religion, age, gender, or sexual orientation. So it's a pretty broad section of things that it covers. So if someone commits a crime, in some cases property crime, in some cases assaultive offenses of someone because of their status, then the hate crime provision would kick in. So there's not a hate crime law itself. Hate crime is a provision that applies to other criminal acts that someone may commit on someone because of their race or color or ethnicity. And generally what it means is in police, when we have an offense reported to us, we determine if it was committed because of hate under one of those conditions that I talked about. And if it is, then we have a reporting requirement to the Texas Department of Public Safety down in Austin. We have to keep track of those offenses each year and send those down there. As far as the prosecution of the case, if it's shown in court, then generally what it means is that if an offense is a Class B misdemeanor, it's going to go up one level to a Class A. If it's a third-degree felony, it's going to go up to a second-degree felony. Now, if it's a misdemeanor A, it's not going to become a felony, but the bottom end of that, the minimum punishment, is enhanced somewhat. So that's what. So hate crime provision in Texas is typically what we call an enhancement if you can show that was the reason for the act in court.
Thank you much for that answer. And Judge, I'm going to go back to you again, and I'm going to ask you, where is the line drawn between the First Amendment free speech and racist language?
Oh my goodness. Pastor, you could not have hit the nail on the head even any more strongly this week. I'm a huge constitutional defender of everything from First Amendment on down. So I believe what we have is a public policy of children not harming themselves as a result of pervasive bullying versus another child's First Amendment right to free speech. I think it is that simple. I think you're hitting the nail right on the head. There have been several attempts at appeals based on the unconstitutionality of things and statutes such as David's Law. But what I think that we have are well-meaning people who are going to be able to win on the grounds that the result of children harming themselves is so grave and so unacceptable that we have to find a way to define what we will not allow. And we have to define it as unacceptable behavior rather than speech. I know that sounds hollow, but I do believe that we are going to win because it is in application to behavior of racist behavior. We are going to win on the grounds that we're going to classify these racial epithets, these behaviors of going online and piling on the individual, the target, as behaviors rather than speech.
Thank you. Judge, I'm going to give you a break. Chief Drain, I'm going to give you a break for a moment, and I'm going to ask this question of our other panelists. And I'd just like information from you as to what parents can actually do at home to teach their children about bullying and harassment and racism. Where can parents find resources that might be able to help them with these discussions? Because it's not always an easy topic for people to bring up. So what can they do at home that would actually help address this and bring an awareness at home, because they may be addressing the bully? I think Brian should take that question.
Let me jump in first.
Go ahead, Doctor.
And then you can certainly clean up. First of all, it's a great question, and let me start off. And sometimes you shouldn't ask me certain questions because I might be a little too honest. Sometimes our students are witnessing behaviors of bullying at the home. And so I think the first thing we need to do is address that as parents. You know, what are we modeling? What are our kids seeing and hearing, whether we know it or like it or not, that we're emanating or portraying that we really don't mean to be sending those signals to our kids. So that's the first thing I would say, is just sort of examine ourselves as parents and role models for our children. But for resources, for tools, if you will, to help address these kind of topics, we have at the school district, that is, we have we call it social emotional learning. And under the umbrella of social emotional learning, bullying, harassment, even racism and discrimination, those topics are covered. We have a very, very robust set of tools, activities, and curriculum that we have made available for our parents. I haven't, but I will put a link in our chat that you can access all of those resources. I think I linked it right there. Some of the resources we have just for our teachers, so you won't be able to get into those because those lessons are copyrighted for our teachers. But this conversation, that question about what can parents do, that's a huge thing here, because I don't want any of our parents, and I know we have about 150 on this webinar, your role as the child's first teacher did not get lost when they entered the schoolhouse door. And so you are always that child, your child's first teacher. We can't take that away from it. We can't do a better job than you at being that child's first and primary teacher. And so it is important that we all take that role, if we have children, very seriously and maximize our impact on our own kids.
And I also would like to just add here that, first of all, I want to make sure that the parents know what the appropriate steps are when you have an incident that needs to be reported of bullying and harassment. And so I'll drop the link in the chat for you to our Plano ISD site that gives you those step-by-step instructions. I think the most important thing for you as a parent to work with your child on is, you know, if you see something that's not right, say something. And so also letting your child know what steps they need to take if they need to report something. Again, we have the anonymous website for you to make those reports. But for the child to do it, it's as simple as going to a trusted adult on campus. In addition, we have some links that we'll also put in the chat just for you to have those conversations with your child and go through some excellent resources for bullying. So there's stopbullying.gov. There is the Stomp Out Bullying website. So and there's several others. So we'll go ahead and place those in the chat for you as well.
This is Lynn with Juvenile Probation. I'd like to build on a good point that Dr. Gober just made. Again, I agree wholeheartedly. As parents, I do think we all need to make sure that we examine ourselves and be really active in terms of what our kids are into. Not just, you know, watching them from the background, but really be engaged and paying close attention, because the media and the things that they have access to today, they're alarming. I literally interpreted that kids can get access to anything they want now, and it's in their pocket. Number two for me is, as parents, I think we need to inspect what we expect. And what I mean by that is, again, make sure that we are tuned in. We have an active ear and active lenses in terms of watching their interactions on these platforms. And if I may, I'm just going to share a personal testimony in that just yesterday, the kids now, a lot of them are into Fortnite. I'm certain that probably most of us have heard of this new gaming system or you know, mechanism that the kids are really into. These kids are pretty brutal in terms of how they interact with one another. And just yesterday, another kid called my daughter the N-word, just yesterday. And this is a kid who we don't know personally. You know, it's a friend of a friend that we were able, again, to track down this parent, and we're going to have that conversation with them, because I also think that's important. I'm all about children. Is it painful to me and to my children? Absolutely, but we don't throw children away. And so it's important, again, that we educate our children, we educate other children who maybe be misguided. And, you know, my wife said it best, it takes a village. So it's incumbent upon all of us to work together to deal with this, but be engaged, be active in what your kids are doing. A lot of parents that come to our agency, I think there's a little misguidance in terms of they want to be more friend than parent, and they're not really involved or knowing what their kids are doing because there's a privacy line. But I think there can be a healthy balance there where, you know, kids have trust, but again, we as parents, we have to be involved and know what's going on with our kids.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in, you know, in the listening rounds that we've done, one of the things that we've talked to the kids about is, you know, why don't you report, right? It happens to you. You can hear the kids talking about the experiences they've had and why would you not report? And then, you know, in your grown-up mind, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but in the mind of a child, it makes every bit of sense. And so the idea of the trusted adult who, when a student comes forward and has a relationship in the building with somebody that they can talk to, has been a prevalent theme of these rounds of who in the building can I go to in a big school where I can tell you something and then you will help me. And the fear of retribution is obviously very real for kids. They're very afraid of not being accepted by their peers, or, and so it's a change of making sure within our schools that students have trusted adults that they're in relationship with, that they understand that when they tell us something, we're going to do something about that and protect them while we do it. And so, we're hearing, all of there are themes emerging, and everyone has a role here. The parents have a role at home, and then we have a role at school, because we don't know who the child is going to tell. Sometimes they tell us and they don't say anything at home. Sometimes they see something at home, but they're not saying something at school. So it's going to take, I think in one of our rounds that, a parent did this, it's going to take the parent, the student, and the school folks to really wrap our arms around these situations to create the safe space that I was talking about in my opening remarks, where a student will come in and tell us because they trust we will help them and that it will not backfire on them. And, from the standpoint of, the kids are the center, right? And our job is to take care of them. And so that's really, to me, that's something that for every grade level, that is work. There are lots of teachers that are that person, but does every student feel that? And if they don't, then we're not done, right? Then there's work to do. And so I think that's something for the schools, and it's also something for home. So we're all in this work. And I also think the PTA is another great organization. They have access to lots of programs related to cyberbullying, bullying, where parents can partner with the school district on how do we have appropriate conversations and programs, at every level within our organization, because what's appropriate for little ones looks very different for big ones. It's why you don't put middle school kids in a high school listening round, because the issues they deal with, they're not the same. And you have to be very sensitive to the age of the kids and where the parents are in the parenting process, because how I parented when my kids were little was different from how they parented for middle. And then when you get to high school, it gets even a little more complicated, because it's like, well, I know I'm going to have the catch and release program, right? It's almost time to release, but you still got to hold on to them, because you got to guide them while you can without, it gets really complicated for high school parents to know. And so I think there's a lot of space in here for partnering with parents on helping parents or grandparents in some cases, or foster parents or guardians, or whoever is helping the kids to become the safety net that we're all in this to help kids together. And we care about doing this work. That's my long answer.
Thank you.
Pastor
Excellent.
Joshua, I'm going to give Superintendent Bonser the amen on that, only because the PTA is an excellent resource. I know I'm pretty sure we may even have some PTA members on this call tonight, but they are a wealth of information and resources and allow you to walk together in the journey of being a parent. And so I echo that from Superintendent Bonser. Every school has some PTA or PTSA in Plano, and I would really advise parents to reach out. If you want to be involved, it doesn't simply mean just fundraising or writing a check or volunteering. It's being involved in how you can make your school better, and what you can do to make your school better is being a part of those programs that will help you parent and help others get the information needed to be successful. So PTAs are an excellent resource.
I want to dovetail off, if I could, Pastor Joshua.
Please do.
Superintendent Bonser and Mr. Lyons, in that when I have spoken to PTAs, their concern is that the people who need to hear this are not here to hear you speak. I would like to have another world where we don't put all of the burden on the victim. of bullying to report. So, or their parents who might also be traumatized by the fact that their child has been bullied. So I'm wanting to encourage the upstanders. You know, the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum talks about being an upstander. I would love to give rewards, and I would encourage everyone to try to think through another universe where we give rewards for kids who just report that they just saw on social media a kid being bullied. Just anonymous report, but they're just making the world a little bit better. They're using a little bit of their social capital in the world to stand up for someone else who's being bullied. I'd also like to encourage, if the teachers are that safe person, that they get a Pied Piper award or something. I mean, the fact that these teachers are the trusted adult in these kids' lives literally will make their future secure. There is so much research to support the idea that one trusted adult can literally change the course of a child's life. One. And I agree with Superintendent Bonser and Mr. Lyons that it is often that teacher. I have many from Plano ISD that I credit fully. I would also say that the PTAs in Plano are very strong. I've spoken to them multiple times on bullying with my court officer. So I want to put a plug in for the upstanders and the people like me who fought bullies their whole life. You're back on mute, Pastor.
Pastor is on mute.
There we go. This question is from one of our participants. And the question is, how can the district become proactive rather than reactive in helping equip students, teachers, and administrators with the resources and tools that are necessary to disrupt this pattern of bullying? And the parent says that this is solely needed in PISD.
I'll start off with that answer. So first of all, we have, and we've always had it before spring break, and we'll have it as long as, you know, we can keep it around, and that's social emotional learning. And in social emotional learning, I think when most of the people on this panel was in school, we might have had something called character learning or something along those lines. Well, social emotional learning is much broader than that, but I wanted to give us some context as to what I'm talking about. And so we have age-appropriate lessons for each of our grades that we serve in Plano ISD. And I've been trying to put this in the chat as fast as I can. We even have resources for parents and really just students to use on their own. And I've been putting that link in our chat. And I'll keep putting it in there as I go through some of these questions. So that's the first thing. So social emotional learning, our teachers teach this curriculum. They're given activities. It's embedded in many of the lessons that they have. But starting this school year, I think we started this in July, we are now going through each grade level, and we have already completed kindergarten, first, and second. And it's going to take us some time to get all the way through all 12 grades, but we have gone through kindergarten, first, and second, and on our way up to grade 12 to ensure that every unit of study has a social emotional learning component. And so, but that takes time, and we're working through it. I expect by the end of next year, we'll be through grade 6, and then we'll get into those high school and secondary grades. But to answer the question, social emotional learning, we have components of that throughout our curriculum, throughout all grades.
I just want to add a couple of things to that. So that happens in the classroom, but I think also on a proactive is ensuring that our staff, our families, our students, that everyone understands what is and what isn't. So kind of like tonight. So really understanding, you know, this is what bullying is. This is how you report it. Being an upstander, having conversations at home. I think that it's so critical and important that we have a partnership with parents so that proactively together between the time during the day that students are with us, when they're at home and on the weekends, and they're in between, communication between school staff, either teachers, administrators, with parents is also key, because at the end of the day, we have to wrap around our students. And I would also add to the social emotional learning, the partnerships at home are going to be essential to being proactive.
You know, the question came in that I would not ask you guys at all, but I think this question is one. And again, Judge, you started out by saying that you did this because the chief asked you to do it. Here tonight because Chief said, Pastor Joshua, I think you would do a fine job of facilitating this. And so I said, yes. My wife asked me today, why are you doing this? I said, because the chief said do it. That's enough for me. Well, so this question came in, and I think it's a very valid question. And so I'm going to address it, but not in a great deal of detail, because I don't think it's the place for it. But since it came in, I think it's worthy of an answer. And the question is, what can the religious community do to encourage more extreme churches to limit hateful rhetoric? Because I think I tend to agree that there are some churches that have some pretty hateful rhetoric. I, as pastor of the Shiloh Church, I signed every communication, a pastor for all people. And I believe that our churches also have a tremendous responsibility. And I believe, if, for example, where the LGBTQ community is concerned, I understand all of the things. I understand from Genesis to Revelation, but I also understand this word called love and how important it is. And so I tend to look at every person that comes into our church as that's somebody's little boy and somebody's little girl. You know, I come from the educational world. I didn't introduce myself that way, but I spent 32 years as a teacher, as a principal, and as the assistant to the superintendent of schools. Well, I look at every child as somebody's little boy and somebody's little girl. In fact, my sixth graders have never grown up. They're still my little sixth graders. I can tell you what seat they sat in, what they like to eat for lunch, what snack they like. I can tell you all of that information. And so I feel that the churches have to promote this love and cannot foster this hate factor. And I don't care what your belief is, but I think our churches have to be bold enough to stand up and say that all of these people still deserve love. And when I asked that question, Judge, about hate crime, and you talked about at the bar and just making a decision based on looking at somebody, I really felt what you were saying, because I see a lot of that through our churches. And I stand against that tonight. I stand against everybody being important, just as you, Ms. Bonser, stands for every child in PISD being an important part of the school district. So that's the answer to that question. Although I'm not a panelist tonight, I still got a question. So I'm proud somebody asked me a question. Thank you so very, very much. Let me wrap this up by asking lastly, as we get ready to kind of bring this to a close, I'm just going to ask, you have resources within your school district. You have counselors within your school district. You're doing everything that you can do for the students, and yet these things still happen within the school district. As we go forward, as we march forward, I just think that a word from our superintendent that again reassures these parents and all of the parents that we're going to do everything that we possibly can to address the issue in a timely manner, so that parents will have that vote of confidence that we're sending our kids to a good place. Ms. Bonser.
Thank you. Well, and I really appreciate having I maybe not be the last word, because I can see there might be others who want to say something, but truly the school district we have some things in place, but the listening rounds and what we're hearing is the work that we need to do about making sure that the students understand what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. How does their device, right? We all have one, it's probably sitting right in front of every one of us. How does that device play into my behavior at school and expectations for myself as a child? And then do our parents understand what the school is doing in order to respond? Does the parent know the process? Do they know when they're going to be communicated with? What can the parent expect when something happens, and how will they know what has happened? And so I just want to reassure parents, like, we are hearing you. We heard Samarian's mom talk to us about what she needed from us from this situation. And we've done 30 rounds with, hundreds of people, and that's parents and students and staff and community groups. And Pastor Joshua, we did a faith leader group because we want to know. And so, our job is to make sure every student has a trusted adult, that we're teaching kids. I know it sounds basic, but right from wrong, and everybody's got different definitions of that. But when you're talking about empathy and caring and respect and the things that a student is going to have to be when they leave our schools, when they graduate as a 12th grader, to be ready for life, you have to be able to be kind, compassionate, caring, understanding, accepting, inclusive, because that's the world. This is a big global world that's become very small that we're sending our kids into. And they have to be ready. And I take that very seriously. When Dr. Gober talked about embedding SEL at every level, that doesn't stop after elementary, because a lot of what we see and a lot of what we hear is middle school's much harder than elementary, because you go from having 1 or 2 teachers to 7. So the interactions just multiply, from 22 to 130 every day. And so, I just think from a parent perspective is I want you to know we're listening. We hear you. The outcome of this is we may have some things in place to technically meet the letter of the law on our processes and procedures, but there is work to be done on the whole child, on the communication systems, and the supports that are in place for students and families and staff as we go through this. And then I think too, clearly helping people understand, like, what's the role of the teacher? What's the role of the school resource officer? What's the role of the police department? Those things are confusing. So everything we can do to simplify the student code of conduct, the processes, and really holding parents' hands through that, those are goals of the district. And so we are committed to this work. We have some things in place, but there's work to do, and we're ready to tackle that work on behalf of kids.
Thank you for that. That was our last question. Let me ask if there's another panelist that would like to have a closing remark, as we are about 6 or 7 minutes from the end of this summit.
I could chime in just real quick. I didn't take an opportunity earlier, but as Mr. Hadnot mentioned earlier, we're a referral department, but when they get to us, we have resources available through our website, Collin County, Texas.gov, and we have a parental component, and that's a vital part of our process too, is having the parents actively involved in our supervision and what we do. But again, I would just like to, since I didn't take an opportunity earlier, let you know we have resources available as well, walking through the juvenile processes. So if parents wanted to access that, what happens when my kid gets arrested, different things like that, to answer some of those questions online.
Anyone else?
I'd like to just say that I'm really proud of Plano ISD. As a proud graduate of Plano ISD, but also my sister is still employed with Plano ISD, and the speaking rounds are just creative, and you're doing more listening than speaking, in my opinion. And so my hat is off to all of you. especially on this call. I saw it grow out of your creative thinking, and I've seen it put in action in the trenches, and you've put your money where your mouth is, and I'm proud of you. And Chief Drain, thank you for inviting me. Dr. Gober.
Well, if I can chime in real quick, I just want to thank both the police department and Collin County for being partners with us in this work. I want to thank our parents that are on the call for your partnership. And I mean, this is a community effort. And as Superintendent Bonser shared, we care and we care deeply. And part of that caring is also living through a cycle of continuous improvement and looking to see areas where we can be better, looking to find areas where we can make tweaks and changes so that we can best support our students, first and foremost, support our families, and support our teachers. So thank you for this opportunity to be with all of you tonight. And thank you, Pastor Joshua, for a fantastic job in facilitating our conversation this evening.
Dr. Gober, I know that you have been very instrumental in putting this together, and I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank you for a job well done. You have continued to communicate with all of us, and it has certainly not gone unnoticed, and we do indeed appreciate it. So thank you very much. To all of our participants tonight, we've had roughly 155 participants tonight that have been with us, and we say thank you. We thank you for your questions that you have submitted. I'd like to conclude by reminding everyone that again, will be posted on the PISD YouTube channel by the end of this week. Don't look for it tomorrow, but by the end of this week. We say thank you for a great opportunity to have some dialogue, some conversation, just some real honesty tonight to help our parents have a better understanding of the things that we're trying to do in PISD. Thank you so very, very much, panelists. And if nothing else, as I say at the Shiloh Church, I am officially dismissed. Thank you, and have a wonderful night. Yes,
Thank you.
you bet. You bet.
Chief Drain.